well, how do we want to address that? Do we want to build it, or do we want to buy it, or rent it in this case? Then you start looking at the potential storage cost, right? And it's like, well, if you have a CRM system, like let's call it Salesforce, shoot, all of a sudden you realize you're paying $125 for 500 megabytes of storage. I mean, I have 64 gigs on my phone and I don't pay that, right? So all of a sudden, you think you have a use case, you're saying, okay, let's go all for it, and then all of a sudden your storage cost goes to $10,000 a month, and you're like, how the heck did we get here, right? So identifying the use case, build versus buy, and then if it is a buy situation, then it becomes, okay, is this best in class? What do they use under the hood, right? Every single day, more and more LLMs are doing fantastic things, but they're all different, right? So if you use, let's say, a Copilot, under the hood, Copilot is using OpenAI. OpenAI is good at a lot of things, but large context windows, large data set isn't one of them, right? It's also not good at numbers, right? So then you might want to start thinking of, oh, which vendors has the type of underlying technology to allow us to do that, right? So it's imperative that you do that type of diligence, or you'll be in that 30% of money being wasted.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what you've said about. I actually don't, from a purchasing decision standpoint, like I don't know that it's that different from other engagements where it's like, well, what kind of points are we trying to put on the board? Are we, is success saving 7 hours a week? Is it being able to service more clients in the same unit time? Is it that we're able to aggregate information across many, many different data sources that you would not otherwise, that a person is not able to keep in mind simultaneously? I think it's not that difficult if you're specific about what you're trying to achieve. That said, there's absolutely, like, perfect is the enemy of good here, and the most effective managers that we speak with have a forward-leaning, experiment-oriented approach, where it's like it's not always really clear where the insertion points are going to be, and you look at, I mean, ChatGPT is a good example of this. It does not have a manual. It's the set of things that it can do is not obvious. I'm using it to help my father-in-law write his memoir. That's not a documented use case, and so I think the teams that are, especially with sort of employees who have an orientation towards this, just trying stuff, getting reps in, if you're still on the sidelines waiting for the models to be better or perfect, or for the form factors or the workflows to be really, really well defined, I think you're going to be starting from behind. And the models are catching up so quickly that you look at the conversation around hallucinations and accuracy from a year ago, that trajectory, problems that might keep you from doing something now are not going to be a problem in 10 months. And I will take the learnings any day of the week.
So given how quickly things are moving, then how would you advise, staying ahead of the curve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So last year I was on the Future Proof stage, and I owe everybody who's there a heartfelt apology. Because on stage I said 2026 is when we'll have autonomous AI agents. Now they're every day, right? It's like a dime a dozen at this point, right? It is so difficult to stay abreast of every single model, every single use case, right? So I don't even think it's even necessary to even try to be in that game. But what you want to do, similar to, let's say you're picking an all-star lineup of investment managers, you want to have an all-star best-of-class group of vendors that are approved by your home office that you could tap for different resources. Because it's my job, a job that I take very seriously, to be up to date on everything, so you don't have to.
So the question is basically like, what do you do about technology changing really quickly? I don't know. Like, full disclosure, I think this, like, real talk, it's hard to predict what's going to be possible in a year. It's like you can look at the trajectory. We know that the models are getting more powerful. There's a world in which the actual final form factor of this is just a machine that uses your computer for you, and that any work that can be done by somebody sitting behind a keyboard is subsumed by the PhD plus level intelligence. Like, that is, serious people are talking about that as an eventuality. That's hard to plan for that future. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like. And so, I mean, this is part of why I say, to use a Silicon Valley term of art, you got to be in the arena trying things so that you are able to, it's the wind and the waves favor the ablest navigators. It's like you can't control the market, you can't control your circumstances, you can't control what technology is going to do, but you can choose your line through it. And I think the information you gather from, whether it's in your own life or your work life, trying things will help you anticipate and respond to things as they start to come into that horizon of predictability.
I guess the flip side of that is, how do you not get caught up in, chasing the next shiny object?
Yeah, I think for me, and one thing I would bestow upon everybody here, right, it starts and ends with the data, right? So it doesn't matter which shiny object you're going for. If the data isn't in order, it doesn't really matter, right? So when I say putting your data in order, I mean going from on-prem to a cloud premise, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's Google, right? Having that as a source of truth, then being able to have all of your data sources that you use all unified, right? Because like I said, the object could be very shiny, it could be great, but the output isn't going to be what you think it's going to be if your data is all over the place, right? Now, it's easy for an individual advisor or someone in our industry to use something off the shelf like a ChatGPT and have something connected to your Outlook or whatever have you. But when you start talking about from an enterprise level, that's when it becomes very, very difficult. So the objects are going to get shinier and shinier, but the source of truth needs to remain having the focus being on the data and having clean data dictionaries, having things very easily, very clean on the labeling, and then the retrieval of that by AI, no matter how shiny the object is, that's where you want to live.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm pretty close to the metal technically, and I believe that large structural changes will affect all of our lives, my kids' lives, in the next 10 years. It's hard to know what those will be, and so I think having a degree of situational awareness about what is happening right now is one of the ways that it's kind of a tonic for what might be. It's like, well, goodness, like ChatGPT is useful. It's like hyper, no, it's like goodness, it solves most of the problems that I throw at it. And so I think, to the point that you were making about having measurable outcomes associated with all of the experiments that you're running, like either it does or it doesn't save me time. Like we can talk about that after a 2-week trial. I think that embrace how rapidly things are changing, try things, but stay focused on like, what does success for this look like? And like hyper no, either it does the thing or it doesn't. And that's like a pretty easy question to answer.
So for someone who hasn't played with these technologies before, Mike, you've mentioned it a few times, to just start using them. How do you start using them? How do you get started, I would say?
Yeah, one of the interesting things where you start getting more and more to like natural language, right? So you want to be at the point where you're talking normally or you're typing normally and you're getting those type of answers back, right? So the easy answer would be like a ChatGPT or a Google Gemini. But really, when you start talking about like, well, how could you make your business more efficiently? I know I could speak for myself after being in business for 18 plus years. Two things I hated was, well, I hated a bunch of things, but meeting notes was one of them, right? I didn't particularly care for meeting notes, and I definitely didn't love spending 30 minutes per client meeting doing meeting prep, right? So those are like two easy, low-lift ways that you could start utilizing AI. Meeting notes, meeting prep, right? Starting there, and then you can start getting into the investment diligence, unifying your investment reporting, and utilizing like Mike's technology. But if you could the time that you could save on something as low lift as your meeting notes and your meeting prep probably would make a demonstrable difference in your business.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it starts in their personal lives and just using chat to like buying a $20 sub and just trying to make a habit of, oh, I'm cooking a recipe, I'm down an ingredient, rewrite this recipe, but without the creme fraiche. Stuff like this. And that informs an intuitive sense for like what these things are capable of. Now, the most interesting interactions I have with chat-based interfaces are typically many steps into a conversation. And what's interesting about these models is, for example, you can ask it to correct its work. You can say, "Are you sure about that? Elaborate on that, or rewrite this in the following way." And what you're doing, actually, and this is kind of in a mathematical sense, is you're getting the model activation weights, it's a technical term for kind of the program that's running, to a point where it can solve the problem that matters to you. And it's that multi-turn conversation that finally elicits that behavior. And these new reasoning models, it's getting a little technical, but these new reasoning models, the new class of models that are really changing how quickly we think things are going to become much smarter, do that intrinsically. The thing is, when it comes to chat interfaces, is that not everybody's going to be an expert at eliciting those behaviors through conversation. And so I think a lot of the kinds of tools that you would assess from a vendor, in contrast to just like, listen, it's a chat interface and it can do anything, but you kind of have to know how to get what you want out of it, is really the approach we take at Brightwave is take a workflow that a human would perform. I want to read many documents. I want to distill down findings from those documents. Those are manager updates, they're SEC filings, earnings call transcripts, industry research, if you have portfolio companies, private market data rooms. Read them exhaustively, distill down findings, and then weave those findings together into a research report that looks like the deliverables, like an investment committee memo or an earnings preview, that humans are producing. And orchestrating that sequence of steps with a chat interface is very, very error prone from a like, am I prompting the right thing, and fairly time intensive. And so I think there's the lightweight, just buy a chat tool on a pro sub and try things. And then there's these select vendors that orchestrate workflows that are like what your team is already doing. And so I think that's kind of how you get started, how you sort of engage with the technology now.
Got it. I just want to remind everybody we're going to open up questions. So if you have any questions, you can hit that Slido link, and we'll get to them in a little bit. Devon, you mentioned, how last year you said that agents were going to be a big thing in 2026, and they're here faster than you thought they would be. What other bold predictions do you have that you want to be wrong about next year?
Well, shoot, my last bold prediction was off by a year, but just the autonomous nature of our business, right? So the agents are here, but a fully autonomous workflow going from client onboarding all the way up to the client meeting, fully autonomous. I'm still holding my 2026 prediction for that, but I could easily see with all of these agentic experiences that having just a profound effect on our business. I mean, one thing that we're doing is I'm trying to solve for propensity to purchase, right? So like, what data is necessary to figure out what type of investment products a financial advisor will buy, and if we could have historical enough data sets going back 20 years, whether it's ADVs, 13Fs, portfolio reporting, administration, can we predict what your next purchase is going to be, right? I would like that to be fully autonomous without having myself, and my team having the scrapers and being able to go that workflow and me being involved. So that's something that we're working on, and I can imagine just based off of the large enterprise conversations we're having, the autonomous aspect won't happen in our industry anytime soon because of AI councils, risk and compliance, but if it's not 2026, it's going to be 2027.
So, goodness, Ryan, like I get confused about what exactly an agent is. I think the industry generally has not accepted what satisfies that criteria. But for the folks here who might not, who may have heard that term but don't know necessarily what it is, the difference between an agent and a language model or sort of AI, as it's more typically conceived, is that sort of instruction response. I ask a question, I get feedback, I'm having a conversation. That's more, you're in the driver's seat. You're saying, do this. refine, dial in, expand. You're telling the model what to do. What is happening in the industry broadly is that these systems are kind of two trends. One is what you gestured towards, which is autonomous self-supervision. So the models are being explicitly trained to know what threads to pull next. So instead of just, I'm going to fan out, I'm going to read a bunch of websites and distill it down together, it's inspect the research results and then ask the next question, pull that next thread. And so you see that with technologies like OpenAI's deep research, some of the stuff we're doing at Brightwave for private market deal rooms. We're going to see, right now it takes, let's say, 6 to 8 minutes to get some of these work products out, 40-page reports. The future looks a lot more like 90 minutes, half a day, to something that would have taken somebody possibly months to produce. And we see this in drug discovery. Like this is not an abstract, like maybe this will happen someday. It's like we are seeing in materials science. DeepMind, this is kind of a different example, but designed a stable plasma configuration for a tokamak fusion reactor. Like that's real work, and you're going to see these systems have longer run times to very, very high quality outputs. I think sometime this year.
Devon, you mentioned sort of the compliance reasons for why autonomous is probably further off than we need. Can you just speak more broadly to how that comes into play, or what firms should be thinking about from a compliance standpoint as they're integrating these AI systems into their workflows?
Yeah, so I know from just my experience talking to large enterprises, all right, data governance, and now you have AI councils, AI governance councils. What they're going to want to know is, on a quarterly basis, you have to report now what type of AI technologies you're using to the SEC, right? That is a very, very real and big thing. And if you can't fully explain what that is, you're going to get big pushback from compliance, right? And it definitely starts with data governance, right? And making sure that the data that the AI is accessing isn't actually leaving your infrastructure to go to train the internet, right? Because that's a big thing, right? So all of that, it lengthens the due diligence process from these enterprises and these financial services organizations, because data governance is huge. Compliance is really big, and I know when we're dealing with the SOC compliance and the auditors, et cetera, we have to make sure our house is in order to make sure that we're able to sell and provide services to the financial services community.
Can you remind me what the question was?
Oh, it's just how compliance comes into play.
Compliance? Yeah. Which aspect of it? Sorry, Ryan.
Data governance and
data governance for AI. Yeah, I think doing business with people who you can trust is like where it starts. Looking for SOC 2 Type 2, having a sense for. I mean, goodness, I've had some very technically informed conversations with compliance officers at various types of asset managers who understand the difference between training a model versus using a model. And I think just, I guess one piece of my view here is that the details actually matter. Like how is this, what is actually happening to the data in terms of a residency, but also like, how is it being used on the other end? I think just being open to candid, critical questions about what are you doing with my information? I think you want a counterparty who has an open and transparent posture as regards to compliance. So Brightwave's CTO was the former CTO of a federally regulated derivatives exchange and clearinghouse. It's like I love building with that guy because he talked to the CFTC all day long, and so I think it's just. Take a forward-looking approach, balance risk, and how much am I going to learn? Maybe I use this in my personal life, not at work yet. But be ambitious, but skeptical.
Okay. One more question. As you think about implementing AI technologies into your practice, how is that going to change the types of skills that you're going to need to hire for, and what should you be looking for? In your next generation of hires?
Yeah, so I am focused on data engineers, right? A hire that is going to be able to take large data sets and make the data normalized, so to speak. And I mean, not everybody's going to think, kind of think the same way, but when data is unified, magic happens, right? As an example, something that we've done at AssetLink is being able to tie financial advisor attrition from unified data, right? We were able to take SEC information, so ADV. We were able to take an advisor's LinkedIn. We were able to cross-reference that with age and generation, and we were able to determine with a 76% accuracy rate which advisors would leave over a 5-year rolling period. Now, none of that would have been able to happen if it wasn't for the unification of the data, because uncorrelated data sources actually have a lot to do with each other, right? When we stack rank, they're like, well, geez, why are advisors leaving? The most was miles to their office was the number one reason why advisors left, right? But if you didn't have the longitude and latitude of the office, and you weren't able to have the ADV filings of the office and where they lived, and all of a sudden they also had a LinkedIn that was dormant, and all of a sudden their LinkedIn popped up, suit and tie on, banner, they're leaving, right? So, but none of this was possible if the data wasn't unified in a type of format that AI could easily retrieve.
Yeah, I mean, I think taste and good judgment and experience. Like, we hire a smaller number of more experienced professionals who are able to, it's not just the tedious kind of grunt work. So this is software engineering, right? You're looking for people who know how to design systems and have a perspective and are able to articulate that to a language model that then executes a lot of the blocking and tackling of software development. I think across any industry, like, taste is going to be one of the most important personal characteristics you can hire for, because a lot of the form filling it's not a job anymore.
All right. Well, with that, I think we are going to wrap up. Devon, Mike, thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody
in the audience, thanks for coming out.
This was a pleasure.